You're about to step onto the very same breathtaking spot where history took an irreversible and fateful turn, where Christopher Columbus first landed in the New World. Imagine a paradise so stunning that even Columbus himself couldn't believe his eyes. But this discovery came with an incredible cost. In this documentary, I walk in the footsteps of Christopher Columbus, not just to see what he saw, to witness the new world as it was when he landed, but to confront the devastating impact his arrival had on the native people and the way the discovery changed the world forever. I didn't just read about it, I went there. I felt it. This is more than just history. It's a raw, emotional journey through the beauty, the horror, and my own reaction to standing where it all began. If you're ready to face the truth of what happened here, and you like to see and experience things for yourself, rather than just read about them in history books, then you clicked on the right video. Come with me now on an incredible adventure more than 500 years into the past. I'm Toby Nomad, and this is my documentary, Where the New World Began, the true story of Columbus's first landing. Look at this. Look at this. I guess my good karma or my hard work is finally paying off because I'm at the end of my adventure on the path of Columbus and I got this amazing reward. Look at this hotel room that I am in. It is looking out over a paradise blue. Look at this, look at this. Look at this, oh my God. I couldn't believe it when she took me up the steps. The lovely lady who works here, her name is Stephanie, brought me up the stairs, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is getting really good, this is getting really good, this is getting really good. And then we got to the actual room, and I was like, no, that's not mine. That's mine. That's my room. This is my room. This is my room. This is my room. Look at this. Look at this. Just look at this. Look at this. Oh my gosh. I'm not gonna want to go anywhere. It was August 3rd, 1492, when Christopher Columbus left the town of Palos de la Frontera on the Rio Tinto in the Spanish region of Andalusia with 3 now famous ships. The Niña with 24 men, the Pinta with 26, and the Santa Maria, which he himself captained, containing 40 men for a total of 90 brave souls. These were caravels, small ships best for long voyages and piracy. They were light and nearly spherical. Columbus was Genoese, from the town called Genoa in what is now Italy, but his crew was diverse. Convinced to sail with him by the fathers at La Rábida Monastery, the Pinzon brothers, from the very region he set sail from, captained his other 2 ships. Most of the crew were Spanish. There were a few Basques, 2 Portuguese, 4 to 5 criminals, including one who was definitely a converso, which is a Jewish convert to Christianity. He also knew Arabic and Hebrew. They brought him along thinking he would be a good translator in some of the parts of Asia that they would discover. They thought that maybe they would meet one of the 12 lost tribes of Israel. They carried with them enough water for a whole year. Their food was mainly salted cod, bacon, and biscuits. They also had flour, wine, and olive oil on the ship. The ships had billowing red crosses to show anyone they encountered that they sailed for the Christian monarchs in Spain. Columbus was using Toscanelli's map, inaccurate, but one of the best they had at the time. I didn't have to sail to the island where Columbus first landed. I flew from Miami to the Bahamian capital of Nassau, and then to one of the out islands. It's still called San Salvador today, and that's what Columbus named it because he was so grateful to his savior that he finally found land. He slept on the boat. I got one of the best views of my life in a tiny hotel called the Sands. Okay, it's a beautiful, beautiful morning here at the Sands Hotel on San Salvador Island. This is the island where most scholars believe, according to his journals, Columbus landed for the very first time in the Americas. So I've had this journey to get here, as you've seen. Flew to Miami, flew to the capital of Bahamas, spent a few days there figuring out what the Bahamas are all about, and now here I am. I'm at my hotel at the island. I woke up. Oh, the wonderful staff here are gonna give me a ride to what's called Columbus's Landing, or Columbus Landing, so I can see exactly where it is believed Columbus first set foot with his crew in the New World. Are you guys excited? I mean, growing up, I just assumed that you think of Columbus, you don't think of the Bahamas, you think of some place that speaks Spanish, right? I don't know, I finally read this book called Rivers of Gold by Hugh Thomas, and I just got really fascinated by the whole path and the story and what was really going on in the worlds as they collided. It's a lot more vast and interesting than I thought, even as a history major. So I've got to explore that. And this is one of the most expensive, crazy trips I've probably ever taken. But, you know, who can say they went to where Columbus first set foot in the New World? Okay, so I'm finally here after all these days of travel. 5 different videos, starting in Spain, where Columbus met the king and queen, to where he had the ships built, to where he completely just took off into the Rio Tinto, out into the Atlantic. I've explored some of the indigenous communities that existed here in the New World before Columbus, and now I have arrived to the actual beach, the actual spot where they first sighted land and first came ashore in the New World, thinking, of course, that they were in India or Japan. Here I am. It's a beautiful beach. It's the kind of beach where the water just kisses the sand. I had no idea the beach would be this beautiful. There's nobody here. It's just me. Hardly anyone even comes to this island, and they've erected a cross here where he first landed. Columbus was very devout and very active in what some believe the conversion and evangelization of the natives. So here it is. I've always been fascinated by the connection between place and people, and I never feel like I can truly understand something until I see it for myself. That's why I love museums. But today is special. It's a living museum that you get to see. And this is the very first YouTube video ever made about this place. Hear the past whispers in the wind, inviting us to take a step back in time and experience the birth of a new world. Right now, for the first and probably only time in my life, I'm standing exactly where Columbus would have stood, and where Columbus's sailors would have stood when they got off the boats for the first time after their journey from Spain, landing in the New World. It's kind of an overwhelming experience just to see where it all began. Of course, it was only a new world for the Europeans. Had already been discovered thousands and thousands of years before by the natives, and the ones who lived here were called the Guanahani, who peacefully met Columbus and his ships. But for Columbus and the Europeans, who were my ancestors, this was the beginning of an era that would change everything. Columbus likely worried about pirates or enemy powers, but he always believed that his biggest enemies were on board his own ships. In just 2 days at sea, his crew got very upset. This was the longest that any of them had ever been away from land. Finally, on October 5th, Columbus argued with the other captains, the Pinzon brothers. Vicente Yanez Pinzon was ready to turn around. They settled their squabble by agreeing to 3 more days to discover land. 3 days or bust. Then, on October 10th, Columbus and Martin Pinzon, the other captain, both noticed birds. On October 12th, they would make landfall, the first European feet ever to touch the Americas south of Canada. The island they landed on looked like a Garden of Eden. The natives referred to it as Guanahani. The Spaniards couldn't believe their eyes. And neither could I when I saw it for the very first time. But on October 11th, 1492, Rodrigo de Triana finally saw una cabeza blanca de tierra, a white stretch of land, and he shouted, "Tierra, tierra, land, land." And the next day, they made landfall right here. It's just really crazy and so geeky that I just got chills over myself telling me the story. Maybe it's because it started raining a little bit, but I can just only imagine it would be like us being in outer space, further than any astronaut had ever gone, relying only on faith and fear and hope. And when you finally hear someone yelling, "Land, land," it must have just been, and then to see how beautiful the land was, how insanely beautiful the land was. And the land probably looked a lot like this. So Rodrigo de Triana blasted the Lombard, and the next day they all touched ground with their own 2 feet right here. And I can't imagine the sand would be anything other than this powdery sand. So next, Columbus plants a flag in the ground. It's a green flag with a Y and an F for Isabel and Fernando, the king and queen of Spain. Okay, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. There were some clouds this morning and I was a little bit worried. It's kind of my fault. I was running a little bit late. Then the lady at the hotel was running a little bit late. And I was like, am I gonna be able to see Columbus's beach and first landing with the sun? And then I got some clouds overhead and the sun is just now peeking through, it's coming through. And I'm gonna have a big patch of sun so you can see this sun-kissed beach where the first Europeans set shore on San Salvador Island here in the Bahamas, the first Europeans to set foot in the Americas, except for the Vikings thousands of years ago and really far north. This was the beginning of the Spanish Empire and what led to the British Empire, which is what led to the United States. This is a hinge of civilization right here on this beach. If they hadn't found this beach, who knows? Maybe they would have turned around and given up. Maybe it would have been another 100 years in a totally different course of history. We don't know what would have been different. Wow, look at that beach. Okay, come on, come on, come on. Look at the beach. The first thing that Columbus and his men noticed was that the natives were naked. He wrote about this several times throughout his journey in his journals. Columbus mentioned this in quite a state of shock and disapproval. He still thought he was on an island near Japan or China, so he was expecting what he would call a more civilized people, who were subjects of one of the great Khans of Marco Polo fame. When Columbus and his men disembarked, they were met enthusiastically by naked men under 30 years old. The men brought them parrots, javelins, and cotton balls. They engaged in some trade, and Columbus, of course, unfurled the royal banner of Spain. The natives were absolutely amazed by the Europeans' beards, especially the white ones. He marveled at their dugout canoes and paddles, which he'd never seen before. But most important, he honed in on the gold piercings that went through some of the men's noses. This is it, this is it. Oh, there's pickers. Oh my gosh, those are really sharp pickers. that's okay. I guess there's some obstacles even for us today coming to the New World. I'm gonna go run and splash into the water. I'm going the opposite direction of Columbus. Oh my gosh. It's perfect. This water's perfect. I've never seen a blue like this. This looks like Tahiti. I've never seen a blue like this apart from a lagoon. Wow. Apparently there's some reef out there. 2 reef sharks just swam past. Now I'm coming out of the water just like Columbus would have. Columbus and his sailors believed that they were in some form of Asia, either India or Japan, something like that. But they must have also thought, wow, we're in paradise. I can't imagine a more beautiful beach than this, and I've been to a lot of beaches, so it's really interesting to think that their main hunger really was probably for gold and wealth and self-aggrandizement, when really, in some ways you could say, they were returning almost to a Garden of Eden. Let's go get closer to the beach. Living in California, we have a decent beach, but this basically makes the California beaches look like child's play, and wasn't expecting everything to be literally so perfect. The shade of the water, the clearness of the water, it's absolutely pure. It's like I'm kissing or touching or bumping up against the edge of not just the past in terms of history and human history and the things that happened to humans, but the way the world used to be and the way the planet used to be. This level of cleanliness and pristine beauty. Look at that. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I've taken a lot of vacations, but I'm one of those people that I love to go to places that are a little bit more undiscovered. How ironic that the beach where Columbus first discovered America is now an undiscovered beach that you can go to and basically have all to yourself for the entire day. And the hotel rates, by the way, are similar to any city in the United States, a few $100s a night to stay just up the street from this beach where Columbus landed. And they'll actually drive you down for free. And, you know, tip the driver a little bit, but it's basically almost included in the hotel cost. So I'm really glad I kind of have this history bug, because this is what made me come to this beach. But if I was just following like Travel and Leisure or Condé Nast and things like that, I would have only gone on vacation to places where they have people that make money by advertising in their magazine. This place doesn't make any money by advertising in their magazine because there's nothing here. So you have to kind of remember that when you're looking for travel destinations. If it's being advertised to you, that means someone's making money off it and has a motivation to get you to come there. If a place doesn't make money, if it's a natural park, if it's a hidden place of natural beauty, you might have to work a little harder to find it, because since no one's making money off of it, they're not going to advertise. Boy, am I sure glad they didn't advertise this. I can't wait to go in. I'm about to take my shirt off and go in. Going in, folks. I guess it speaks really well of Tahiti that I compare everything to Tahiti. But this is what Tahiti looks like, and this is right here close to North America in the Bahamas. Look at that water, look at the water. How about a private beach for the day? Guess all those taxis I paid for in the main island of Bahamas were worth it, because this is free. Come walk in the glass with me. Okay, so tell me, what do you think? Of all the destinations I've gone to, what do you think about Columbus Beach? Columbus's Landing, the beach right here in San Salvador, Bahamas. Is this one of the favorite places I've taken you to so far? Do you see that I'm not shaking or trembling with coldness or anything like that? The weather is warm, there's a breeze wafting against my skin, and the water, it's the perfect temperature. It's just enough to cool you down. It looks like glass. So when Columbus and his ships first sailed, coming from the darker waters of Spain and the Atlantic, and it finally started to get shallow, and you're looking through glass, he must have been really focused on making money, because the first thing I would have put in those journals was that I can't believe I'm looking at water like this. It's like a glass greenhouse over heaven. Italian pastas and pizzas are made with tomatoes, but tomatoes didn't exist in the old world. Those are a new world food. I mean, slavery in the form that it had didn't exist before until the slavery triangle exchange that happened between Europe and Africa and the New World. I mean, everything that we are inheritors of is a product of this Columbian exchange. So everything changed forever for the future of humanity and for the future of the planet. And it all happened right here. The first steps toward change were probably literally on this rock. Columbus wrote, "All that I saw were young men, none of them more than 30 years old, very well built and very handsome bodies and very fine faces. Their hair coarse, almost like the hair of a horse's tail, and short, the hair they wear over their eyebrows, except for a hank behind that they wear long and never cut. Some of them paint themselves black, and they are the color of the Canary Islanders, neither black nor white. And others paint themselves white, and some red. They bear no arms, nor know thereof. For I showed them swords, and they grasped them by the blade, and cut themselves through ignorance. They have no iron. Their darts are a kind of rod, and some have at the end a fish's tooth." Okay, so the clouds have rolled in a little bit. I'm going to take a little break from doing beach shots. And I wanted to take three perspectives from this landing of Columbus, because I think there's really three distinct, I would say, groups of people and mindsets that were here at this precipitous moment in world history. Right here where Columbus landed for the first time in October of 1492, it was debated who actually saw land first. Columbus says it was him. There was another guy on the boat that says it was him and that Columbus took credit for it. Guess we'll never know. The first person whose perspective, obviously, we think about is Columbus, Christopher Columbus, a guy from Italy, Genoa, or Genoa, however you want to say it. He'd been trying for years and years. He tried, as you know, with the Portuguese government. They didn't want it. They didn't want to fund the trip. Spain didn't want to fund the trip, but finally, after the defeat of Granada in 1492, when basically Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand retook the whole country that is now Spain from the last of the Moors, the Muslims from Africa. Actually, I don't know if they were all from Africa. They're probably, by that time, they were from there, but the Moorish and Muslims that lived in southern Spain and had those beautiful cities like Granada, they fell. In 1492, they fell. So finally, Queen Isabella, I think, was the main one that finally agreed. She had a little bit more power than her husband, and she said, okay, you can have this trip and we can fund this trip. So for Columbus, he thought he finally made it and that he was vindicated and that all of his doubters would be quashed and shamed. And for him, this would have been a major, just exhilarating victory. But I also think that for Columbus, because he was so focused on personal aggrandizement and wealth and power, as it seems, he was probably thinking like, yeah, I got to get to work. I got to get to work and establish my claim here. And, you know, there's all that stuff that comes along with the mind of someone who's basically running a business and an enterprise. So I imagine Columbus felt a combination of relief and even daunting about the tasks that is ahead. But for that first moment when he landed here, it was probably just huge relief, a little bit of that bliss that you get when you finally achieve something. Now, the other group of people are the people that worked on the ship and the people that he got to go along, which nobody really wanted to do. There were several times where people wanted to mutiny. So for them, it was probably like, oh, wow, we're not going to die. I'm going to put myself in their shoes in a little bit, but another group of people that I would like to put myself in the shoes in, if I can stretch my imagination a little bit, are the Lucayans, the Guanahani, which were the natives that lived here. So the natives that lived here had originally migrated up from South America and apparently were very peaceful Taino, Arawak people. They probably had a lot of curiosity in their mind when they saw people with beards and skin colors that they'd never seen before. I don't know what they thought because they didn't leave written records, and most of them were pretty much gone because of the exploitation by the Spanish. So I don't know, it's hard, but like being here right now, just imagine you've never even seen a ship more than a canoe, and all of a sudden you see something massive. It would be like for us probably seeing a spaceship, except for the fact that they never had movies predicting spaceships coming. So it would be like us seeing something that we never even saw in a movie. Woo, that water's coming up. Okay. So then you start to get in your head like how much of this is surreal? Is this something of the gods? Is this a spiritual experience? Or are these just people from the other side of the world that happen to have the technology to develop ships faster than we did? I think most of them probably didn't think that. So, as a Lucayan, gosh, I don't know. I mean, I would be scared. I'd be scared what they were going to do. But apparently the reports are that the Lucayans were warm and welcoming. So I guess that says a lot about their culture and maybe their peaceful state of mind. I feel like if we saw a big ship coming from outer space that we had never even envisioned what it looked like, and people that we never even envisioned what they looked like, we'd probably be running and screaming. And apparently then, at least not all of them did that, because several of them greeted the ship and had an interaction with Columbus. So what do you think? Like, transport yourself here to where I am right now. Imagine that you're a Lucayan Indian living in a hut, living with nature, living off the land, and what would you think about these strange creatures coming aboard your island? What would you do? What would you say? What would you think? What would you feel? And what would you say and think and feel differently if you knew that your whole way of life would be gone in 100 years?
Columbus then sailed around the island. The Indians, a name given by Columbus to the native peoples, would stick. They were excited and asked the European men if they were from the sky. Bahamian natives came from all over to see the newcomers. Columbus described most of their precious gifts as trifles too tedious to describe. But he complimented the unique trees. In fact, he reveled in the flora when his mind wasn't on Asia or gold. He complimented the clean houses, the crafty hammocks, and mentioned the small, barkless dogs that the Indians had as pets. Columbus described the singing of the birds as, quote, so sweet that no one could want to leave.
When I'm in times of trouble, Virgin Mary comes and speaks to me, speaking words of islands. Let it be land, let it be land, let it be land, let it be land, yes, let it be land. Speaking words of islands to conquer, to pillage, for gold. Let it be land.
this is my land. I'm Christopher Columbus, and this is my land. Get the hell out of here, Indians. This is my land, this is my land. This is my new kingdom, this is my land. Thank you, Virgin Mary, for choosing me and my whiteness and my Spanishness over these heathen Indians and all of these criminals on my ship. Thank you for letting it be me. I shall call it San Salvador in your honor. So here, the island of San Salvador is one of the easternmost islands of the entire Bahamian archipelago. It was called Guanahani by the native Lucayans. Columbus renamed it San Salvador, which basically means Holy Savior. Columbus wrote in his journal that the beauty of these islands surpasses anything that he'd ever seen, as much as the day surpasses the night in splendor, is what Columbus wrote. So he had quite the first impression. What blows my mind is just how it's presented if you look back in these journals, how it's like, yeah, they were really nice, they came up to us and they exchanged gifts, and they weren't really good with weapons, so gosh, that'd make them really easy to subdue. So let's just grab 9 of them. Well, 2 of those 9 escaped, but before Columbus got back to Spain, he would capture even more. One of them, he actually called Diego Columbus. So what's going on there, we can only speculate. Of course, his journal was meant more for historical purposes and to document what happened, maybe even scientific. One of these natives that he had seized from this island.
But Columbus quickly realized that not only was there not much gold apart from in their noses, but the land was flat, with no opportunity for agriculture or colonization. So he moved on. Columbus would explore other Bahamian islands in this new Eden that he had found. Probably he went to Rum Cay and almost certainly Long Island. When he met women with skirts on one of the islands, he seemed a bit relieved. The nudity had been uncomforting for a European of the 15th century. Columbus said, quote, "The women wear a small piece of cotton which barely covers their genitals." But it was better than nothing, and it seems many of the crew were not complaining. He again marveled at the trees, which were like nothing he had ever seen in Europe or even Africa, calling them, in his words, the greatest wonder of the world. His comments on the fish were equally jaw-dropping. Columbus said the fish were so unlike ours that it is marvelous, the brightest colors in the world, blue, yellow, red, and painted in 1,000 ways. He also saw whales. He was blown away by this new paradise, this new Eden, and he said so in his diaries. This is a nice glimpse into the still human side of the man who would soon cause so much pain and suffering in his quest for gold and fame and converts. On October 24th, Columbus and his ships would depart the Bahamas for a slightly larger paradise, which he believed was part of the Asian mainland. The natives referred to it as Colpa. We now know it as Cuba, the second country that Columbus ever visited. He reached Cuba on October 28, 1492, and sailed up a beautiful river, probably the Bay of Bariay. "Never have I seen such a beautiful thing," he remarked. He compared it to Sicily. He had found another true paradise. There, Columbus noted different kinds of palm trees than he had ever seen. He saw small female figurines and silver ornaments, exciting for a religious zealot who was really probably more of a wealth seeker.
He also saw mangroves, those tangled keepers of so much of our American ecosystem, for the very first time. After a few days of exploring the shores of northern Cuba, he sent 2 Indians and 2 crew members inland to see if they could reach a larger settlement. One of those that he sent inland was the Jewish, Hebrew, and Arabic translator that we mentioned earlier. They were to return several days later, describing a town with 50 big wooden huts that were palm thatched and looked like dormitories. This was the first major settlement that Columbus, or any Europeans, would encounter in the New World. The leaders treated them like gods and sat them in wooden chairs made into animal shapes while they knelt and kissed their feet. The Spaniards certainly received a royal welcome. The Indians gave them tobacco and cotton from the ceiba trees. On November 12th, Columbus and his crew sailed to Inagua Grande, which is one of the largest islands of the Bahamas and just off the coast of Cuba. When they returned to Cuba shortly after, they even found wax that had been traded all the way from the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. This revealed that this area was interconnected. But on October 21st, things would take a turn for the worst that would portend some of Columbus's malfortunes to come. One of the captains, Martin Pinzon, sailed away on his own with one of 3 ships, leaving Columbus just 2 ships under his direction in an entirely new place. He would soon find out that his own crew were perhaps not his only enemies. Spain would end up getting gluttonous on silver and gold and crashing their whole economy. All the dynamics changed forever because of this. And of course now, we have the most powerful country in the history of civilization and the world, the United States, which began because Columbus landed here. So in many ways, this spot is a beginning for everybody, because everybody is affected by what happened right here at Columbus Landing on San Salvador Island in the Bahamas. I never thought I'd say this, but thank God for these clouds, these rainy clouds. Whew. I got burnt so bad doing some of those shots that I'm still feeling it. I'm going to be feeling it for a while. But I wanted to come back here to this world-changing spot. I'll probably never be back here in my life. Most of you will probably never come here. It's so off the beaten path. Columbus learned from the Indians that he met on Cuba about what some would call the Carib Indians, a different tribe from the Taínos that he had met so far. According to Columbus, native after native across Cuba were fearful of these Caribs. In Columbus's words, the Caribs were men who ate men, and that in killing one, they beheaded him and drank his blood and cut off his genitals. There is no archaeological or physical evidence at this point to confirm whether there were cannibals raiding other native societies on Cuba and Hispaniola. And many have claimed for years that Columbus simply made this up to defame the Indians so that he would have an excuse to kill them or enslave them later on. But recent research has shown that there were Caribs this far north, and that they did practice cranial modification, which sounds a lot like how the other Indians in Columbus's journal describe fearsome creatures with dog-like features. There were times when Columbus and the Indians had excellent rapport. There is no consistent narrative of Columbus as a villain out to exploit and capture and enslave. He was enigmatic, and there's no consistent evidence of Indians fleeing or being fearful, although many were. But some in the towns that Columbus and his scouts explored would actually feel the Spaniards to figure out if they were actually flesh and blood, or if they were gods. They asked them to stay as long as possible in some places. In one of the villages that they visited, 500 men and women asked the Spaniards if they could accompany them on their return to the sky. The Indians wanted to go with them in this case. Columbus only allowed a handful of them to come. Oftentimes, he simply detained them, but he often kept the men and women together, writing that, "I did this because the man would behave better in Spain with women of their own country than without them." Columbus had learned this from his experiences detaining people off the coast of Guinea in Africa. So this video, I want to be the beginning of something for me and for you as well, because I want you to come with me on a journey on this channel. I want this to be about discovering the world. I want it to be about discovering who we are, and I want it to be about discovering things that we didn't know that we didn't know, to change the way we think by looking back and by looking forward. I hope you stick around, because this is the beginning of something amazing, something challenging, something beautiful. So I'm curious, what do you think of when you think of Columbus's first landing? Do you think of a hero, an explorer, somebody who had the audacity to do something that nobody else had done yet? Or do you put yourself in the perspective of the natives who lived here, who at first were excited and eventually ended up having their culture and their way of life gone forever? Whether that was intentional or not is a subject of great debate. Maybe you can comment on that, or be the one who does a documentary about that. Or do you put yourself in the shoes of a more typical average person that would have been on the boat sailing with him, that would have had to sleep underneath in a kind of a U shape, but would have ended up, after that harrowing journey, being able to see something that no human of their kind had ever seen before? I want to know what you think about all this, and I want to know, has me coming here changed the way you've thought about anything? I'd love to have that dialogue, so leave a comment below in the comment section. Give me your suggestions about where you want me to go next as well.
Columbus was not the best with the newest navigational tools available at the time, but he was an expert at what's called dead reckoning. So far, he had made it several months in a completely uncharted territory with minimal damage or loss of life. He did not wish to linger too long in this new wonderland, however. Glimpses of gold in attractive, nude young women's noses made him eager to return to Spain with news of wealth and possible glory that he could share with the Christian monarchs. He sailed eastward from Cuba, landing, for the first time, on the island of Hispaniola, in the country that is now called Haiti. There he met civilized natives just like in Cuba, who lived in virtual towns with extensive agriculture, including cassava, also known as manioc, which was their staple, as well as beans, peanuts, and fresh and delicious new fruits like guava and papaya. But on Christmas Day, Columbus took an extra long nap. He later blamed a boy left steering the largest of his ships, the Santa Maria, because he let it run aground and smash into the sandbank there off the coast of Haiti. The Santa Maria, the biggest of Columbus's 3 ships, quickly began to sink and had to have all the crew and belongings evacuated by the friendly local natives, including the chief or cacique, Huacanagari. The Santa Maria, Columbus's flagship, was destroyed. Left with only one of his 3 ships, because remember, the Pinzon brother had sailed off with the other one, Columbus now had to leave behind 39 men to fend for themselves on an island in the New World governed by Indians. The wood from the ship Santa Maria would be used to build a fort. None of those 39 people would ever be seen again. But that's a story for another time. Columbus sailed west, and what happened to him on his lone last ship is also a story for another day. He returns to Spain.
So for any of you who are curious, this is all being filmed with an iPhone. It's pretty amazing. The reason I do that is because it has so much versatility. I don't have to take a huge setup, and I can go to places that would normally require a whole crew, and I can just go by myself. It takes a few pieces of special equipment like an attached mic and a tripod and things like that, but the actual footage and a lot of the audio is literally just iPhone. Whenever someone says I don't like history, I say actually that's not true. You just didn't like your history teacher, or you didn't like the history book that you were forced to read, or the facts that you were forced to memorize. But history is just a story, and there's nobody who doesn't like a story. Even better, it's a true story. History is just a series of true stories. It's the true story of your ancestors. It's the true story of us. So if someone's good at storytelling, there's no way that you can't like history. It's the most amazing story because it's the true story. And if you've reached the point in your life where you've realized that real life is crazier than anything you can make up, then you know exactly what I'm talking about.
But Columbus made it back to Spain a hero and was welcomed with open arms by Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand in Barcelona. The first Spanish settlement in the New World that he left behind by accident was founded on the day of the shipwreck on Christmas of 1492 in what is now Haiti, and it was named by Columbus La Navidad. That's Spanish for Christmas. So Merry Christmas, Columbus. You've just established the first permanent foothold for Europe in an entire continent, for better or for worse, depending on who you asked.
I find it interesting that when you read Columbus's journals, when you read about this first landing, one of the first things that Columbus took note of was that they were naked. They were completely naked, the natives, the men and women. And of course, what's more interesting than the fact that they were naked is the fact that that was so interesting to Columbus. We know what ended up happening, that the natives ended up dying and basically becoming completely extinct from this island, probably primarily through diseases, some of them sexually transmitted diseases and other diseases that they had not been exposed to, such as smallpox. But it's also really interesting because it says so much about one of the core values of the Judeo-Christian culture which Europe brought to the Americas, which is this idea of shame about our bodies. You shouldn't be naked. It's shocking that you're naked. How incredibly inappropriate that you would greet somebody naked, because you should be ashamed of your body. How don't you get that? Isn't that universal? Of course, we grow up thinking it's universal because we're all taught that there's something wrong with being naked. But that really comes from our religion, and it comes from the values of the Abrahamic religions that teach that the body and that the sex and that sexual desire and that so many aspects of our sexuality are something to be ashamed of. The Indians who were here didn't have that, and that was the very first thing that Columbus noticed. So I do this channel because I want all of us to think about things in a different way, and I think that's one of the things that we can use history and the stories of how people thought to think differently, because it should make us realize that why was it shocking that someone was naked? Why was it in 85-degree weather with 80% humidity? The only thing that could have possibly been wrong with being naked was that it was immoral, which is completely subjective.
It would be more than 150 years before any of the islands of the Bahamas that Columbus discovered for Europe would be settled by Europeans. Columbus was the first to take the native Tainos, called on the Bahamas Lucayans, as slaves from the island of San Salvador. 2 fled right away, but he captured more, and even took some all the way back to Spain, where they didn't sell for very much and were not so profitable as to keep his primary interest. Columbus likely never returned to San Salvador. We don't know exactly how many times the Spanish visited the Bahamas at all in the years shortly after Columbus. We know that Amerigo Vespucci came to the Bahamas in 1500 and took over 20 slaves on a slave raid.
There simply weren't enough natives left in what would become the first real Spanish colony, over on the island of Hispaniola, to supply the endless need for labor, so the King of Spain himself ordered that those Lucayans be imported from other islands. The Spanish would come to the Bahamas and carry them off into slave labor. They specifically exploited their talents also at diving for pearls. Within 25 years of Columbus's arrival on the island of San Salvador, the native population had been decimated by slavery and disease. When the Spanish decided to traffic the remaining Lucayans to Hispaniola in 1520, they could only find 11 of them left in all of the Bahamian islands. The Bahamas would remain uninhabited for another 130 years after that. The Spaniards, whom the first Taínos saw as white-bearded gods from the heavens, had in fact had the almost godlike power of ending an entire group of people in the blink of an eye. Some Lucayan blood certainly survived in the intermarriages with other slaves or their Spanish conquerors, but the creative, talented, and kind people that greeted Columbus for the first time in 1492 with parrots and cotton balls were gone forever. In 1649, more than 150 years after Columbus first landed in the Bahamas, a band of British religious pilgrims from Bermuda landed on Eleuthera, another Bahamian island further north from San Salvador. This was the beginning of British colonization that would last, in some ways, arguably, until modern day. So San Salvador became part of the new British Empire in the New World. Many British subjects loyal to England fled the United States after the Revolution and established their slave plantations on the Bahamas. I got to go to the ruins of an old slave plantation here on San Salvador. Wow, this is quite lush down here. This looks kind of like one of those natural sinkholes, right? Do you think that...
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
What do you think they use it for? Do you think it had water, or did they use it for something else?
They actually grew bananas in it.
Oh, yeah, there was a banana hole at the plantation I went to on Nassau Island. Wow.
This
Oh my gosh.
wood.
What?
And they beat the slave.
No way. So this whole little spot was just a place to do beatings and maybe lock them up for a while?
Yeah.
Wow. Ooh, and the mosquitoes are now beating us.
Yeah.
So we're down at the punishment pit.
Yes, it is.
Ooh. Yeah, and the mosquitoes are here to remind us of that punishment. Ooh. This is a lot of mosquitoes. Oh my gosh. So I'm going down to this pit where it was a place to punish slaves. Beat them or keep them in. You can see it's in one of those limestone sinkholes they have here on this island too. Wow. I mean, what a chilling place, but it's beautiful and chilling at the same time.
Yes, it is.
Woo! Those mosquitoes are gonna carry me away. But even that way of life is no more. The population of the island is now less than 1,000 people. Some of the people are probably descendant from the enslaved people that worked on this island hundreds of years ago. Others likely came to work in the salt industry that existed for a while here on this island of mainly swamps and mangroves, without much area suitable for large-scale cultivation. Others have moved here from other islands to work in the small tourism industry. The small town of Coburn Town is the center, but the main industry is tourism at the Club Med Resort north of town. I went there and found a nice place to forget your troubles and our history. There were beautiful beaches there at Club Med, a bit more wavy than at Columbus Landing, and mostly French tourists, who were rounded up at regular intervals to eat and sing and dance along to the latest pop hits, while a large Columbus sign loomed in the background. The mismatch was striking and sinking. that's the world we live in, isn't it? So the very first place to see real, lasting contact between these two great worlds, these two ginormous continents, was this little island of San Salvador. This little spot, this now barely visited place, and only bashfully appreciated. I hope this little documentary helps bring some understanding and awareness and a real sense of place to this pivotal moment in history. As I leave this island, I'm struck by the paradox of this place, an absolute paradise that became the stage for both discovery and devastation. Standing here where Columbus first met the New World, where the innocent Lucayan people first met my European ancestors, the meeting that would change the entire world forever, has been a powerful reminder of how history can shape and sometimes shatter the lives of those who came before us. It's also been a testament to how much seeing and going to an actual place where events took place can deepen the experience and understanding in ways that you never expected. If you found this journey as eye-opening as I did, make sure to check out my other videos where I dive deeper into Columbus's voyages, to Columbus himself, and explore more of the breathtaking islands of the Bahamas. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you will never miss out on more adventures like this one. Until next time, keep exploring and keep questioning the world around you.